Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. We are continuing with our lessons of the history of Ulul Azam, and we're talking before we get into the topic of the specific Ulul Azam, we have uh, we have we have to talk about Prophet Adam alayhi salam. So we have in Um, Surah Baqarah, Surah 2, Ayat 30. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَعِيلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. That's the grammar, but the Khalifa. And when your Lord said to the angels, Al-Malaika are the angels, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi. Verily, I am going to make in the earth Khalifa, a successor, a Khalif. Now, what does this Khalifa mean? The Mufassirin, they hold different opinions about it. Does it mean a successor to the previous creations that were on the earth? Does it mean a successor that God is putting in the earth to represent him? Qalu. They said, At-taj'alu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku ad-dima'a wa nahnu nusabbihu bihamdika wa nukadisu laka. They said, are you going to make in it who does facade, who is doing facade, who is doing like uh transgressions, mischief in the earth, in it? وَيَسْفِكُوا الدِّمَاءَ, and they are shedding blood. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُكَدِّسُ لَكَ, while we are doing tasbih with your praise. We're glorifying you, extolling you. And nukatisu, this kind of has like a meaning, like maybe you go look in the tafsir, but it's maybe like purifying for you, something like this, right? But this like they translate it as extolling thy holiness, right? So you could look into that in your spare time. So the angel said to Allah the Exalted, what are you are you going to make in the earth a one who is going to do facade and who's going to shed blood while we praise you, while we with your hamd, with your praise, while we extol you with your praise? Okay, let's stop here for a second before continuing the rest of the ayat. Now, these angels, some of the ulama point out that when we look at the topic, the discussion that the angels have when they're asking, first we can notice that they have an intellectual desire. They want to know. They're not opposing God. They're submitting to God, but they want to know. So they're asking Allah the Exalted. Second thing is what can be pointed out is that maybe they knew something about a previous creation on the earth. And in this regard, we have narrations in we have a narration in Tafsir Qumi with a correct chain, which says that on the earth there was this creation called Nasnas. And this Nasnas, they had disobeyed God, they had committed bloodshed, and Allah destroyed them. And the jinn were also here too, and Allah took them away from our sight. So that's something to keep in mind. And this is also very important to realize that, look, that hadith was spoken around 1,300 years ago, approximately. And it's not until somewhat recent times that people have discovered what they call as Neanderthals, cavemen, and things like that. So maybe it's a good possible explanation for those Neanderthals and cavemen type thing. Because why? We know that human life began with Prophet Adam alayhi salam. But yes, we have in narrations that there were other creation here. So it's a good possibility, something to think about and examine when we look at the discussion of the angels when Allah was creating Adam. Okay, that they had some kind of previous knowledge, right? About this kind of creation. Okay, now let's continue the ayat. Kala inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. Allah the Exalted said, verily, I know what you all do not know. I know what you do not know. Now look, saying this to the angels who could observe creation from a different angle, that I know what you do not know. Allah the Exalted is the only all-knower. Stop fooling yourself by thinking that you, O mankind, O jinni, O angel, that you know everything. You know, these angels, they're, like I said, they have an intellectual desire. They know they don't know everything. But I'm just saying, like, don't fool yourself by thinking we know everything. And this happens with people and jinn, probably. They think they know everything, and or they say that certain creation knows everything, but only Allah the Exalted is the all-knower. Only Allah the Exalted. Go read the Quran. Just the example of the time of the Day of Judgment, only Allah knows. It uses innama in the Quran. Only Adatul Hasr. Okay. But look, Allah the Exalted is putting these angels in the check, right? Verily, inni a'lamu ma lam ta'lamun. Verily, certainly, I know what you do not know. So the very beginning of mankind, from the very beginning of mankind, you see the purpose of his creation. Adam was created to be the Khalifa of Allah on the earth. The angels recognize that there's going to be bloodshed and corruption in the earth. And Allah knows the secrets of all of this, the purpose of all of this, knows what they do not know. Okay. So the purpose of creating Prophet Adam alayhi salam, the Abba, the Baba of all mankind, was to have a Khalifa on earth, a representative. Even though Allah the Exalted is present, I am not saying that Allah created a representative and then left. No, we do not believe that. Believing that Allah is in one place and not in another is very incorrect. In fact, we believe that location, time, place, space, all these things are creations of God which have no restriction upon God, which do not restrict him, which are not, he's not contained by them, yeah? Rather, they are dominated by him. So hence, God is present everywhere, but yet not limited by the limits of time the limits of creation, the limits of place. So Allah the Exalted created Adam as a representative, as a Khalifa, as a successor. But Allah the Exalted is present. He is aware. He is everywhere, but not contained in limits. This person serves, this Khalifa serves as an intermediary of guidance to humanity. This special chosen person that God selects is an intermediary for the guidance to humanity. Kind of like if we have a mayor in a city, we have a city and we have a mayor who's connected to the president or the prime minister. Now, say that prime minister, that president wants to convey a ruling out before like social media and everything. How would you do this? You would send it to the mayor. You want something implemented, you would send it to the mayor, and the mayor would then work on informing the people and putting it into action. So kind of like this idea. We have a mayor who's an intermediary for us to get the guidance to Allah the Exalted, to do what Allah wants us to do. But to a much greater extent. Like this example is quite small, right? So you may say, okay, it's not exactly perfect. That's okay. I just want the general kind of idea, basic idea. So some observations over here is that Allah the Exalted creates with purpose and not in vain. Allah doesn't create in vain. Lagwi is something that is done without any purpose. Abath is something that's done vain with no purpose. So Allah doesn't create it in vain. Nothing is in vain. Every single thing in creation has a purpose and an aim. We may not see that purpose and aim because we're ignorant of it, because we don't know everything. When we look up at the planets, we may see, okay, a planet of water, a planet of sand. We don't know the purpose, right? So we think, okay, what's the use of this planet there? Maybe we can find some scientific proof, but say we can't find that. But there is most certainly a purpose and most certainly a reason. But we are ignorant of it. Allah the Exalted does not create anything in vain, does not create anything in abath. The second thing is that the angels seem to have previous information about some creation. When we look at the way the angels talk to Allah the Exalted, we see that it seems that they had some kind of previous information about some bashar, some kind of hairless animal that was on the earth before. That's what some scholars point out as a possibility. We're saying possibilities, and like I said, we also have hadith to support this. And that hadith has a reliable chain in Tafsir Qumi. Provided you aren't of the view to reject everything in Tafsir Qumi, then this hadith is valuable. So, the angels seem to have previous knowledge about a previous creation. And we have that in hadith. That's the Nasnas. And the jinn, they lived on the earth. The Nasnas committed bloodshed and sins, and Allah destroyed them. And the jinn, they were taken away from our sight. So there were previous creations, and it's very possible that these previous creations were like us, but different. Maybe they didn't have the Akli abilities, right? Maybe they had something else. We don't know much about them. We just know that they were destroyed. And now we find bones of ancient peoples and things like that. That's probably them. Okay. So, third thing is that Allah the Exalted demonstrates his being all-knowing over the angels. The angels who could see things from a different perspective, from different angles, Allah the Exalted is demonstrating that he knows more than them. Now think about that. We as well are ignorant of many things. Even the Imams and the Prophets, they humbled themselves to Allah the Exalted to learn from Allah what they did not know. All that they knew was totally dependent on Allah the Exalted. Go read their biographies. Go read the hadith about it. Go read Quran. Allah the Exalted is the only absolute all-knower. In fact, that is His self. He is absolute knowledge. He is absolute power. So anyways, in this story of the creation of Prophet Adam, Allah the Exalted demonstrates His being all-knowing over the malaika. Fourth is the purpose of creation of Adam alayhi salam. Was that he was made as a Khalifa in the earth. And I said Khalifa, there's many different ideas amongst Mufassirs about what that means, and that could be saved for the tafsir class. But basically, he is a representative of Allah the Exalted on the earth. He is, maybe many of these different meanings could all be validly considered, right? He's a successor to the previous peoples. Okay. Or previous creation, rather, because there was no insan, there was nasnas and jinn. Insan is something different. It's a new creation that started with Prophet Adam, at least several thousand years ago. Maybe like 7 to 10,000 years ago or so, roughly, give or take. Okay, fifth is some say the angels can do tark all well. So angels, some say they could do tark all well. So maybe some would consider this here when they're questioning, but I don't know about that. Because they could be just questioning to know, right? And intellectual desire is a good desire to want to know, and they're not having any ill feeling about it. But if it were to fall into something where there was a better way, like better way would have been not to ask. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's better they asked, but if a better way, and then the less better was to inquire, then that would be a kind of tarko awal. And some of the scholars, they believe that angels can do tarko awal, but angels do not sin. And that's angelology, another topic. Whatever different opinions and discussions, that's another place. But I'm just saying, some believe that the angels can do tarko. Like prophets, they could do tarko. Okay, so now we can point out a very important feature. That is the aspect of education. This aspect of education, which was mentioned after the purpose of the creation of Adam. So we could reflect on this noble ayat of the Holy Quran. And we can see how closely linked knowledge is with human purpose. In Surah Baqarah, ayat 31. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ أَرَدَّهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَاءِ هَؤُلَاءِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Such a short ayat, such a vast meaning. Okay, so he taught Adam all the names of everything, the names of all of it. Then he presented them to the angels. Then he said, tell me the names of those, if you are right. Okay. Now, there's a lot of discussion amongst the tafsirs and the mufassirin on what these asma are. Historically, even nowadays, there's discussion. And in the narrations, we see discussion as well. But one of the one of the points which could be a fallacy is stating that these names are only the Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because Ayatollah Makaram Shirazi points out that haula'i, that these pronouns, hum and haula'i, can be used for inanimate and animate things if they are a group. So if you have a mixture of inanimate and animate things, and then you want to talk about them, then you could use these pronouns. But if it's only a non-rational thing, then you wouldn't use these pronouns, right? So some scholars, like I think if I recall correctly, Saint Tabatabai, he believes differently, right? So that's a point. Now, when we go to the narrations, we see that it talks about um, these narrations are attributed hadith because they are morsel. So we don't know if they're connected to Imam, but there's a couple hadith, like in Tafsir Ayashi, there's a hadith which says that these names were the names of things, the mountain, the rug, all these things. So then from that aspect, you could include the names about the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Now, also we should state that some scholars give tafsir on this. They say, look, this wasn't just the mere like superficial names of things, but this was the reality of these things, knowing their properties and all this type of information, not just knowing what they're called. So this is, like I said, lots of discussion that could be taking place in the realm of tafsir on what these names are. Okay, to which the angels admitted that Allah the Exalted knows more, right? Then they depend on Allah the Exalted for what they know. Then Adam alayhi salam informs them of the names of those, haulullah. To which again Allah the Exalted calls attention to his exaltedness in his knowledge. So over here, you can read Surah 2, ayats 30 to 34. And you can see basically this story coming about and mentioned. So before I end the lesson, let me tell you some things about the Asma. So there is a disagreement amongst the scholars historically on if these Asma meant names of things, or the realities of things, or the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Now again, I want to point out and emphasize this, that if we're saying that it's the names of all things and knowing the realities of them or just the names, that's a separate issue. But if it's the names of all things, then we could include some of the names about the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. As long as we can find valid proof for it, there's no problem. But saying it's only that would be the problem with that interpretation, right? So there's a difference. We got to be jurist-like when we're looking at things. We got to consider things logically, not just emotional. Okay, so it seems to me, so if we say it has a general meaning, if we say that kulluha, all of it, that is a meaning of the names of things, and we could possibly say that this is including the realities of things, right? And it's something, like I said, this is not tafsir. I'm just going over. You could tell that there's some various different opinions. And you could do that own research yourself and see different opinions on this topic, and that's up to you. But anyways, even saying that, we could say that with that knowledge of realities of things, with that taught knowledge of names of things, then we can include some knowledge about the final prophet, about the successors, about the Aimah, and different things. So it's possible from the mere fact of saying it generally to include the specifics. To saying as a possibility now. Now we have to do the field work and look at and see what kind of valid evidences we have. and it's not always what you just find put out there from one side or mentioned from a pulpit. Sometimes there's other evidences and other things to look at, and we got to analyze things like a jurist. Okay, we have to think, we have to examine, we have to use tools. Sometimes you have to go through study and education for many years to be able to analyze things. Like you may need to study Ilmul Rajal, Ilmul Hadith. You may need to study Arabic language, different tafsir methods. You may have to use Ilmul Mantiq, logic, to be able to come out with a proper result of what we have with us. Not just I find some random hadith, I don't even know if it's authentic or reliable, and then I say, this is the view of Ahlul Bayt. No, we need to analyze things. Anybody could go pull a hadith and then narrate it. But is there opposing hadith? Is there grammatical arguments? Is it a weak hadith or is it a strong hadith? This is vigorous academic Hausa-like approach. Okay. So that is, we need to be careful and we need to analyze things and we need to research them. But regardless, like I said, that there's some morsel disconnected hadith in Tafsir Ayashi as example, which says, and Majmal Bayan too, it's in there as well, which says that among other things like what is the mountain, what is the rug, etc. Some attributed hadith suggest that it is a vast meaning then. However, they are attributed hadiths. Remember, I don't know if I said here, but when I say attributed, I mean that either I can't verify it or I haven't checked it and or I don't know if it's weak or I forgot or something. But these are more I did have a look around some years back, several years ago, a few years ago, and I couldn't find a chain of narration. There could be something out there. I mean, we could only, the time that's permitted for a topic could be quite limited, going from one topic to the other. But the amount of time I spent on it, I couldn't find any chain, and there could be something out there. So they were morsel. And this is the kind of the tragedy in research is when we find a hadith which gives us an answer to the problem, but that hadith is morsel or that hadith is weak, and then we're stuck with we don't know. Okay, so and but we have the Quranic verses. So if the Quranic verses suggest that to us, then we could do more research um, on the hadith. Okay, so the view of Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi is that the names are the realities of things. So according to Ayatollah Makarim, Asma are the realities of things. Now, here I would add that one knows things about them, and it's no problem. It's no problem if after knowing some things about them, these asma, that a linguistical system is also born from knowing that realities or knowing about those things. So instead of saying that it's just purely a linguistical system, like some have suggested, that's just the names. If we find it valid to say that it's the realities of things, then we could come back around and include a linguistical system being derived or arriving from knowing the reality of things. Or else, how can you even differentiate what you're talking about? If I know phone and I want to talk about phone, how will I know what screen is? How will I know what electronic part is, plug is, all this, volume button? So there has to be, you know the things, and you also have a title assigned to it. Coinage occur. So I don't see no problem in having this occur from uh, underneath or included in this idea. So it's up for you on your researches. We're talking about possibilities, and equally it's not problematic to say that humans have gained a good chunk of their language system from knowing about the things. Okay, but these are like tafsir topics, right? And it's not, I'm not, then in that view though, then we wouldn't be saying it's only the language system, right? That's the point, because don't get confused by what I'm saying. Because if some people say it's just the linguistical system, that is not what I just said as a possibility. What I said was that you could combine both ideas as a possibility, as a maybe. So there's a difference. We remember we got to be critical. We got to be like this. Okay. So if we take this view, then we may also derive from this that a language system was also then imparted, taught to Adam alayhi salam. Um, some scholars may be inclined to think that this is an original Semitic language. This word Semitic was coined in the, I think, 1800s or 1700s by a German academic who wanted to classify different languages in like the Middle East and Africa. So some Ethiopian language, Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and he included those, and those were called Semitic languages. So by the early 1900s, one of the Western writers, he believed that a good percentage of, I think, Americans at that time believed that both Arabs and Jews were Semitic people. So when looking at the historical basis for the word Semitic, then it's something new, and it includes Arabs, Jews, uh, Ethiopians, all these different people from the aspect of language, right? But here, when I'm saying a Semitic language, I'm just using this uh, kind of like a metaphor for something that had its root, that these languages could have had their roots of, and maybe many other languages. Yeah. Okay, so maybe some of these offsprings of these languages can be dead languages. They're not around anymore. As example, both Arabic and Hebrew has changed through the years. Hebrew especially because it's changed through the years. Aramaic's hardly spoken anymore, and Arabic, modern Arabic's different than Fusha Arabic, which is classical Arabic. Even now in our scholarly researches, we have to go sometimes to old dictionaries to find out what the right meaning was in the time of the Imams or in the time of the Quranic revelation, because now the Arabic is more modern. Maybe it's more specified. Maybe the meanings change somewhat. Or like Egyptian dialect, we don't have mu, we don't say mu from mahua, right? Mahua is become mu, right? So this is their languages change over time. Different adaptations happen. Different words get imported. Different meanings get dropped. Different things occur to languages. So our languages have changed. So we have to connect to what the actual text was or the spoken language in the time of revelation to really understand it. So it becomes very important then to learn Fusha Arabic. And not only learn Fusha Arabic, but then study what the actual words meant in the time of the Quranic revelation and in the time of the Imams alayhum salam, so that way we could understand what they're talking about. So languages change over time, so it's very important to keep note of that. Anyway, so the point is that these names, these asma that were taught to Adam, there are various different opinions amongst the Mufassir, but we'll leave that to tafsir for investigation. I just gave you some possibilities, some maybes, and a brief overview of the topic and how we have some morsal hadith. And at that point, we will leave it here and we will come back next week, inshallah, if Allah grants the tawfiq. to teach another class of the brief history of Ulul Azam. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.